Welcome back to a brand new episode of Full Metal RPG. I'm your host, Brendan Carrion, and it is a gothic New Orleans evening in front of this haunted mansion that I also live in. And you can tell because you can see it on the internet, and that's definitely real. All right. It's episode 109 of Full Metal RPG. I got my co-host, Richie Buzzkill. What up, playa? How you doing?
Take two. Better be good. Better be good. You're fired.
Oh,
Take
boy.
two.
Oh boy.
That was my mistake. My bad. Anyway, I'm doing better now. We're recording theoretically.
Recording. It's a part of podcasting, kids. Podcasting 101 is you must actually record the podcast, or else there is no podcast. All right.
It's a good tip.
So we won't dwell. We're not dwelling on that. Always forward. Ashley, what up? My other co-host. How you doing?
I am fantastic. I am in space. So
Good.
Doing great. Which
Loving
is
it.
the final frontier, as someone has pointed out to me before.
Are you in 10 forward? Enjoying like
some Raktajino? Yes. And a mermaid mug. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Did the replicator replicate the mermaid mug to drink it? Oh,
yes.
Sick.
Yeah.
Fucking sick, dude. All right, great. And we have a special guest today. We have Khalboun Khelil, all the way from the East Coast of the United States. Freelance writer, independent role-playing game designer, and writer from some properties that Full Metal RPG fans love and hold very dear to their hearts. Khaldoun, welcome.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm backstage at an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
Yes.
Chilling out. Glad to be here.
Yes, I love it. Beautiful. So, this is your second time on the show. Welcome back. I understand you've been working on some cool materials, and perhaps today we'll get some little seeds and kernels of like what you've been working on. Sound good?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. Feel free to pick my brain about whatever. And I know that there's a couple of things that I've been working on that you guys want to talk about, and we have talked about, and hopefully I'll have some more interesting things to say than I did last time. I won't repeat myself.
Well, I know I have the feeling one of our cultists has already given us a question to ask you. I suspect that the question will bump up against one of your non-disclosure agreements, but we're going to ask it anyway because we said that we would. But we'll get to that later. We'll get back to that later. So, that is always a fair answer to the question, which is that the role-playing game company that I work for doesn't want me talking about that just yet. So here we are. Everybody doing well. Everybody holding it down. Solid gold. Let's do a show. So
we all just nod our head. It's now a video show for some reason.
Oh,
but
yeah, it totally is. Okay, yeah. We really got to stop.
That.
We really got to stop doing that. I definitely listened to some episode 1, and there was definitely a little bit of like, oh, you can tell that we're on video now, and we got to get our brains around that. All right. So we got some new patrons for the Patreon. Patreon continues to roll strong. Very happy with the support we're getting from the cultists on Patreon. We have 2 brand new ones, and they're both kind of close to my heart. One of them is my old friend Rob. Fucked up your name, Rob. Rob Arcangeli. I'm sorry about that, dude. It was like my tongue literally felt swollen, and it wouldn't. I was going like this. Anyway, Rob Arcangeli, thank you for your Patreon pledge. Then my close personal friend and professional associate Chris Kohler of Slow Death Games has also pledged some Patreon support. And I talked to both these gentlemen one-on-one about their Patreon pledges, and both of them listen to the show, and both of them kind of like believe in what the show does. And of course, we're very heartened by that. Ever since we over the years, we've changed a lot, and we've gone through a lot of different kind of just iterations trying to figure out what the show kind of is and what it means. And I really feel like the latest, greatest version of Full Metal RPG is just the most like to the core of what it is that we're trying to do. So the fact that we've gotten so much appreciation from the cult to help us do this work is we're infinitely thankful. And I want you to know that we have some really big plans coming up over the next 12 to 24 months. And those pledges that we get on the Patreon are what will allow us to make all that cool stuff happen. So if you are listening to the show and you thought about pledging for a long time, please do consider it. And to all of our patrons who have pledged for all this time, and some of you have been like consistent Patreon pledgers for like 3 years, which blows my mind. Thank you all so much. We literally can't do it without you. So again, thank you very much. And thank you to Chris and thank you to Rob. You can interact with both of those gentlemen on our Discord server, which is still popping. We have such a great community down there of awesome people. I, for one, am having a blast hanging out with Chris and Rob and just a lot of really fun other people. And we talk about a lot of stuff. You don't have to be a super role-playing game nerd. You don't have to be a Star Trek nerd. It helps, but you don't have to be. You can talk about whatever you want. Come down to our page, our Discord server. So that's all I have to say about that. Shall we take a trip into the black hole?
The black hole.
The black hole. The black hole is the ever-sucking
That's
void
right.
that consumes all of our time, resources, and attention. It is role-playing, the greatest of hobbies. So, everyone, I've been talking too much. Let's talk about what we've been up to. Ashley.
Yes.
Riddle me this, Ashley.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What have you been up to?
Well, I still have my Pathfinder 1 and 2 campaigns going, and I actually, after we talked about what it takes to GM a game like Pathfinder and how much work goes into it, I was talking to my roommates, the GM for it, and I was like, how is it that you can GM 2 different campaigns that are both Pathfinder, but 2 different versions of Pathfinder that are really similar, but just a little bit different? And he's like, it's awful. It's a lot of work. And I'm like, I can't even imagine the work that goes into that, but he does a really good job with it and it's a lot of fun. So, no one's died yet.
Did he say, was that a quote? Did he literally say awful?
No, he just said it takes a lot of work. Yeah,
no,
he said it takes a lot of work to do. And, so I made sure that he knows that I appreciate the work that he puts into it because they're both really good campaigns. They're a lot of fun.
Awesome.
So,
awesome.
yeah.
I think your GM is on our Discord, actually. So, what up to you? Thank you for being on the Discord. And thank you for putting in all that hard work on those 2 Pathfinder campaigns, because I'm sure it's breaking your back.
Yeah. So, I have both of those. No one died in Pathfinder 2 yet, so that's exciting. We're almost done with the intro module adventure that we're doing. And we have another person coming in to help out so that we don't hopefully die. I don't know. We might still die. I don't know. But those are still going. I have Ravnica Campaign that just started. We just did character creation for it. So it's a 5e Ravnica Campaign.
Magic the Gathering based.
Yes, because I also play Magic. And so we have some of our Magic friends that have gotten together and we're going to be doing those campaigns. That I'm pretty excited about. I'm actually playing a barbarian for the first time. I usually am a spell slinger or something more finesse than just smashy fucker. So I'm excited about that.
Are you an elephant person or?
I'm an orc.
Okay.
I'm an orc, and it's called a Norden, I guess. So it's not a barbarian. It's like a Viking.
Right.
So I'm excited about that. So that'll be starting up soon.
Ravnica is the one with like all the guilds and shit, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
How does that play style function within D&D? Is it fun and engaging, kind of like when you're playing vampire and you're trying to choose like a clan and a sect and that kind of stuff, or is it? I mean, is that something that happens at character creation, or is that something that happens as you're playing?
At character creation, you choose your guild because the type of character you play is going to be based on your guild and what the goals of the guild would be and all of that. So as far as actually playing, I don't know yet. I'm excited to get into it and see. But like some of the guilds don't like each other, and so I have a feeling that it's going to play out similarly to how Vampire does with the clans.
Cool.
So
great.
So I'm excited about that. And then I also started the Tiny Cthulhu actual play. We did character creation for that last week. That one is going to be on Gallant Knight Games channel, so we'll put information about that out when it's available. But I'm excited to get into that too.
Rad.
Awesome. Yeah, Defos Cultists. When we start posting Ashley's the links to Ashley's work for the Tiny Cthulhu campaign, Defos, go check it out, and check out Gallant Night Games and the Tiny line of products for your
Tiny
kind of
D6.
like, yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Khaldoun, how about you, man? What are you up to? What's cracking?
I've been under quarantine here right outside DC for about I don't know, about a year now, basically. So that's been a bit crazy. And I just moved, right? I just moved here from LA, and then basically about 3-4 months after I moved here, it was just quarantine lockdown. I've just never really been able to, I guess like full on unpack and like get on with my life down here. So on some level, that's a little weird, but it's given me, a lot of time to write. So I've been doing a lot of writing for, RPGs and board games and stuff. And I'm starting a D&D campaign, 5e, and I'm playing D&D in some campaigns. And I'm just writing on my own stuff here and there as well. Yeah, I've been trying to keep busy.
Solid, because in LA you were kind of a fixture in the LARP community, right? And you were part of some big LARPs. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, mostly what's called like troop LARPs, not really the like large organized play stuff. I've had mixed experiences with those. I've tried them every now and then, but I usually find like smaller games are usually more my cup of tea when it comes to LARP, and specifically vampire LARP is my area of interest, not so much boffer or fantasy LARPs. But yeah, I've been doing LARPs, running and playing them, I guess since 93, 94, something like that.
Wow, no
And
kidding.
yeah, I know, it's crazy. Yeah, no, my first LARP was in like Balticon in 1992, and that was run by Mike Tinney and Ian Lemke, who did Night Owl Productions, and Mike would eventually become the CEO of White Wolf, and Ian, of course, wrote Changeling and still writes RPGs to this day. So it's kind of weird back then because you really bumped into the creators, pretty early on. In fact, we even decapitated Mark Reinhagen in a LARP in Atlanta. Yeah.
Life
I mean,
goals.
technically, we didn't
Hashtag life goals.
decapitate him. Yeah, his Templar decapitated him and gave us his head. So that was, I wish we'd taken a picture. But yeah, but in any case, LARPing is its own special thing in the RPG community. I think it's really something special, and it really something special in the terms of vampire as well. I think that if you never have the opportunity to play live action role playing as a lover of the vampire game, especially, that you really deserve to treat yourself to do that. To if you're comfortable doing it, to try it out, because it really brings a whole other dimension to the vampire game that I don't know if you get to experience on a tabletop level, especially if you like the political dimension of the game. Of course, the most important thing is having people you trust that you play with. That's even more important in a live action setting than in a tabletop setting, like hands down.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the way that things have been going with the pandemic, like I imagine that LARPs have just been completely shut down. I imagine that there's just really no ability to LARP, even if you wanted to, right?
Yeah, I've seen some people try, and actually the LARP that we ran that my partner and I ran in LA before we moved to DC, which was a Sabbat LARP that we ran for about I don't know, 6-8 months before we left. That was played. I'd say 50% of the LARP was played over Discord. It's kind of like a text RPG. So that we probably could have continued to play if we knew the pandemic was coming. We were planning on continuing it on as a live action LARP here in the DC area, and then everything got locked down. So I think that Discord gives you that. If you're moving from a LARP space to a Discord space, I think that's tenable. You can do it. You just need some dedicated moderators, really. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like all things in role playing, right? Absolutely. So how
Well,
about you, Richard? What you been working on, man?
Well, I've been playing Eternal Eyes, where got got captured again, and thrown in a pit with a cage over top of it. So we'll see. I think we've already escaped that, but that was lots of bugs in a jungle. That's it's about as spoilery as I can get right there. But um, and I'm I think I finding the voice for the character because I created it was a priest, so that's always something that's kind of interesting for me because I'm not a Bible person or a religious person, but it was fun to have a philosophical conversation with a cultist, so to try and convince them to do what we wanted. And they're like, oh yeah, well, I'll go show you my terrible god. Sure, fine, whatever. So I got what I wanted. It just took, of course, this is the GM's like favorite thing is just to literally have conversations about philosophy using role playing. Is like literally if he has said that if they could have gotten degrees in philosophy in the amount of time they spent doing philosophy discussions in his games over the years.
No, I think that's great. I think that's an excellent like application of the RPG space, and I think that you find that in a lot of these kind of more like cerebral horror games. I know that comes up a lot in Vampire, where you get, especially when there was like things like Paths of Enlightenment and stuff. There was a lot of time spent talking about like, well, what is good, and like, what does it mean to be human, and in Mage and in Cthulhu games, you're going to get a lot of, well, what is reality and what does that really mean? Like, why does any of this shit matter? Kind of interestingly, Warhammer ends up, like, if you listen to the Warhammer novels about the dumb Space Marines, uh, those kind of tend to break down into these conversations that are like junior philosophy courses where it's like, yeah, it's definitely kind of like layman like science fiction philosophy,
Okay.
but it's
Yeah.
definitely you get a lot of kind of space marines talking about philosophical issues because their existence is kind of a paradox in and of itself, and then whenever they are put in a position where they have to decide like, well, what should we do, then they have to argue about it, right? And that's, I mean, that's very kind of Star Trekian in a certain way, like conundrums in space. Let's argue about the bullet points of from a philosophy book. So I think that's a great way to spend an evening role playing. I'd much rather do that than having a dungeon crawl. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. And we definitely had a little. There was a little like that was the next thing was then he took us to the terrible place. But we it's when you're dropping into a new character in the middle of a long running campaign, it's sort of trying to find your footing because you're so used to a certain jacket. Like you've got your jacket on that you're like, I am this character, and then you put it on, you're like, oh, I have to hang this jacket up. Like it's my favorite jacket, but otherwise it's going to be completely destroyed. And I think this is what the jacket wants. And then I put on a new jacket and it's got a priest collar on it. I'm like, well, I got to figure out how to get this collar to be the right size. And that's a tortured metaphor that we'll have to live with forever.
It's on the internet now, dude.
That's right. In video.
It's locked in the servers. Magnets have encrusted it forever.
Yep.
I think that's an interesting kind of point to bring up, like new character in an ongoing campaign syndrome. It takes a minute to get used to it, doesn't it? It changes the whole vibe of the table. And it's strange because it's kind of almost like bumping into your ex-girlfriend. You've like been broken up for a while, but then you're like going to the movies with the same friends, and you're like, well, this all looks very familiar, but it doesn't feel very familiar. You know what I'm saying? And then you have to reorient the sensation of playing that character at the table. And I think that sometimes it can be very successful, much like reorienting your ex romantic partner into a friend. And sometimes it is not. And sometimes the campaign just, crumples in on itself in its own weight. much like a relationship can divide a friendship group. You know.
Yep.
I do hope that it goes well for you, young Richard. I do hope that you're able to accomplish that.
I'm finding the traction. I think we're getting there, and yeah, I'm it's on the campaign is definitely on the back. You know, it's heading towards home base, and we're like, you know, we're rounding third, and we're just about there. So,
Nice.
Used a sports analogy today because apparently there's some big game on TV.
I
So
don't what. All right.
sports.
I don't know. Do I need to do a commercial with with like a dog on my head drinking beer or something? I don't know.
Well, yes.
Okay.
Now, since you've offered, Richard, I am definitely going to take you up on that.
All right. I'll work on a commercial later.
Cool. Great. So for the Brendan man, what? Okay, so I played some Esoteric Enterprises with my Esoteric Enterprises crew. And that game is really firing on all cylinders. We had one of those sessions where some people made some plans. It was like kind of like they were doing like a Shadowrun footwork episode, and then two characters who are not often paired together decided to pair off and go do some footwork. And I don't want to say hilarity ensued because that sounds very kind of like twee, and I don't think I run like a twee game, but they really got themselves in over their heads. The dynamic that happened between the characters created like one of those snowballs of problems that you as GM are always kind of like salivating for, because they just lined themselves up for all this horrible shit. And then I was able to initiate all these plot lines that I literally didn't think were going to happen for another 2 or 3 sessions. And
like a tight Seinfeld episode.
Yeah, exactly. Like now they're gonna get to deal with the fallout of those things in the next couple of sessions instead, which will be much more exciting. And so I just love my Esoteric Enterprises campaign. I love the players that play it. They're fucking super great guys, and they do a lot for the show. So I'm always down to play Esoteric Enterprises. And then I kind of found myself piqued by Soulbound from Cubicle 7. And so I'm going to take a second and kind of sit here and pitch Soulbound to people. Let me just start by saying when this game was in development, I thought it looked unbelievably bad, okay? And I would roast the shit out of it every time they'd post a development like thing online. I would always be like, "Oh my god, this is so stupid! Like they want you to play like a tree man or something, and like what the fuck am I supposed to be doing in this game? This game just looks ridiculous. It just looks really, really, really stupid." And so when it came out, I was like waiting for the bad reviews. I was like, well, I'm waiting for the bad reviews so we can start doing memes, right? I want to meme the shit out of this. And then instead it actually got really good reviews. And like and it wasn't just like I heard one person say, "Oh no, it's really good," and I knew that they were Age of Sigmar players or something. Because Soulbound is the Age of Sigmar role-playing game from Cubicle 7 and Games Workshop. And if you're familiar with Age of Sigmar, it has kind of a turbulent little like past as to like, is this good? Is this complete shit?
Yeah.
No one really knows, right? And they've really been honing in over the last couple of years to try and make it like an fucking top tier property. And as it turns out, Soulbound is totally on point for taking AOS into a top tier property role playing game situation. It's got a fresh system. It's got a fresh environment to play in. It's got all kinds of great hooks. It's weird, yeah, but it's weird in a fresh, cool way. Like it doesn't feel silly. It feels like kind of bonkers, like more Cockian in a way that you want to interact with. It doesn't feel kind of like we've seen in these OSR games where it's almost kind of like deliberately over the top, like it's acid gonzo Space Jam. It feels very earnest in what it is. And I gotta say, I'm fucking blown away by this book. I can't get enough of it. The release schedule for it is very aggressive and very hot. I want everything. I'm buying everything. I can't wait to fucking run Soulbound. And I didn't think I'd say that. I was like I was saying, I was getting ready for this thing to fucking trip and fall on its face, and I'd be like The Simpsons, like, you know, that was my position.
Yeah, I mean, the Discord is basically a stand for that game now. Like half the
Yeah.
half the posts are about Soulbound, and the other half of the posts are about Age of Sigmar or whatever. So you know, I got my corners I haunt, but like it's like it's a fantasy game, okay.
If you really want to see how the worm has kind of turned on the perception of Age of Sigmar as a property, go on the Full Metal RPG Discord, because I was making new channels and I was like, well, I'll put an AOS one in here because someone might want to use it. And it's like our most popular channel. Like people are really interested in AOS, not only from a game design standpoint, which they are doing very exciting stuff for that game in that studio, but also they're just super excited about the new material that's coming out of it. And that's exciting, man. That's an exciting place to be, where Warhammer Fantasy isn't essentially a nostalgia property. It's not some big nostalgia trip where everybody's just like whinging about, like, is it as good as it was 10 years ago? And then here's a book that is a restatement of something from 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. This is fucking new shit. And for one, am like all about it. I'm fucking here for it. So
I mean,
enough about me.
Yeah, you had
go
me
ahead.
at Morkakian.
Yeah, that's the reason I'm willing to try it.
Yeah, well, because so one of the things I always thought that was kind of a stick in the mud about Warhammer Fantasy roleplay was that there was part of it that got a little bit too grimdark and kind of, I don't want to say real, but it was a bit too grounded in Renaissance fantasy, right? And it didn't have that kind of like, oh, you're sailing on a fucking blood ocean and you go to the elf land and it's like people living in dream pods and doing drugs and shit. They kind of brought it down to somewhere between Moorcock and Tolkien, right? That was kind of like an understandable world, right? But fucking Soulbound is just bonkers. It's like it's people who live in this weird fantasy alternate dimension where it's like literally you could go to an ocean that's made of blood, or there's like a mountain that's made of skulls, and that's just the way it is. There's like the Skull Mountain, right? And then people have to have a town at the base of the Skull Mountain and figure out their lives and how they live in this like deranged ecology. And so that in and of itself is interesting to me. But then when you put on top of it that there's these adventures that are going on, there's these fantasy adventures where it's like, oh, there's not only do I live by the Skull Mountain in my village, but also there's orcs that live on the other side of the Skull Mountain, and they're very angry, and they've formed a raiding party, and now they're coming for my village. Oh, I got to go find some like Magnificent Seven type fools to defend my village. And I'm like, let's play that. That sounds great. I'm all in. I'm all in for Soulbound.
I feel like the skull economy is very valuable in Warhammer properties because skulls are on everything. Like I feel like that's like a common object. You just have the skull shop that you just like go
skull inflation in Warhammer is out of control. Skull inflation. See, it's just the skulls are everywhere, so they're actually worth nothing.
Right.
But let's talk about what we're here to talk about today, which is Dune role playing. So we have Khaldoun on, and Khaldoun, I think I'm allowed to suggest that you may have written for a little bit of the Dune role playing. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, mostly game master stuff. But yeah, I'm familiar with the book and helped write it, and I am writing on future supplements for it.
Fuck yeah! Now, Dune is a thing. It's a sci-fi fantasy concept that if you've spent a lot of time in sci-fi fantasy and probably in role playing, you've interacted with probably. It's one of those books that, like, if you're like a young male nerd, someone probably puts in your hand sometime around when they're doling out copies of Lord of the Rings or The Fountainhead or something. It's one of those
Yikes.
types of books.
I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
you're
no,
not.
seriously.
Unfortunately, you're not wrong, but like,
Right? It's one of these things that when you're entering into adolescence and you're sort of starting to form your worldview about how things work, there are people who are introducing you to this literature, and Dune is a big part of it for a lot of different people. Um, and it has this kind of storied past where fucking David Lynch made a movie that was supposed to be on the coattails of the Star Wars fad, but it's very weird and it's also kind of like dark and perverse, and can you even understand it? And there's a director's cut and all sorts of stuff combined with like the Kevin J. Anderson like schlock novels that came out that were like ponying off of like, Brian Herbert ponying off of his dad's like literary legacy. And so it's been around for a long time. And it's this kind of thing that role players have always kind of had on their minds when access to Star Wars role-playing game materials and Star Trek role-playing game materials and Lord of the Rings role-playing game materials have always been very readily on hand in one form or another. Dune materials have not. There was the one kind of like abortive attempt that WotC made to put one out, and then there's like a whole saga about why it didn't happen and whether that book's any good or not. My understanding is it's not very good at all. But now here we are in this new era of role playing as like a valuable way to express an IP. We have a new film coming out that will kind of redefine how that saga looks and feels visually. And we have with it a new role playing game. So here's my question: Is role playing in the world of Dune like the biggest, most awesome thing that could ever happen, or is it like are we just gonna fall flat on our face? What do you guys think? React to me. I'm talking too much.
I think it's one of those things that's sort of difficult, and I'm very interested to see what happens with the new game. But I was just because we were talking about this a while ago, and I finally I think I read Dune for the second time, and then I finally finished Dune Messiah. So, and then I watched the Lynch, and I'm trying to fit player characters into this universe, and I'm like, who are the player characters here? Because all these, I mean, I guess nobles. That's about the only thing I could think of, but it's very difficult to get nobles right. I think in a role playing game, and I think that's happened in like, what was it, the Game of Thrones role playing game, and a couple other systems, but it's not a mainstay of the genre. So I was just trying to think of how that would work out. But
I could see them separating it kind of into houses, like kind of like clans or guilds they do in other role-playing games, because you have like, House Harkonnen, Atreides, and you can have like the Emperor. And the one that I thought would be really fun was Bene Gesserit. Like if they could do like a Bene Gesserit kind of house or guild or something like that would be cool, because that was kind of the most interesting faction to me when reading and watching the movie and all of that. So I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
And Fremen, obviously. But yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, because the a part of Dune is a role playing game. Like one of the aspects is the political aspect, obviously, and part of that is your house and who you serve, building up your house and what that means. Whether you're part of one of the major houses like Harkonnen Atreides, Carino, or you belong to a minor house that perhaps isn't in the books. You just make it up yourself. And that is basically the goals you're trying to accomplish, and who that house as a minor house is aligned with or under. That will basically dictate the goals of your party, and the resources and objectives you're trying to collect and hit. So that was kind of I think part of the difficulty of writing a Dune game in the past. And now I think that there are a lot more tools like when we explain, these kind of concepts of, collecting resources and a power base. Uh, those are concepts that gamers now are much more accustomed to and understand than they did in the past. Like in the past, I feel like in the 80s, especially in the 90s, like the concept of you have a castle and you keep your shit there. Even that was kind of on shaky ground. There wasn't a lot of that kind of accounting bookkeeping. Now you have games like Blades in the Dark, where you're running whole neighborhoods and like you have like bars and weird businesses you run basically like marked down on a map. So I feel that Dune is going to benefit from that, in that it's going to have an audience, a gamer audience. It is not going to be confused by the idea of running and building a power base, and basically setting your own objectives, not just like, now this module is Skull Mountain, let's do that now.
Yeah, well, and our two audiences are also, like, we forgot to mention 40K, which I feel like took a lot from Dune, God Emperors and
yeah,
whatnot.
a little bit, just a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit. Anyway, but yeah, I think the story game, kind of the two, starting with White Wolf, but into the more indie stuff later on, I think has really prepared the world for less combat in their RPGs, which there's definitely combat in Dune, but there's like, it's either very short or like a war, like that he will go through in like a page, like. So
yeah. And it's done with
if I had to compare, right, yeah, I mean, if I had to compare Dune the RPG to an RPG that I'd say like Fading Sun. You ever played or read Fading Suns, which is a sci-fi RPG, which is very Dune-esque, which was written and built by former White Wolf writers. Like it's very clear that their inspiration for that game was very Dune heavy, even though it's a much more kind of fantasy and space kind of game than Dune is. Like Dune is very much a sci-fi game, while Fading Suns is much more of a kind of fantasy and space game. That I feel is probably a good comparison to what a Dune game would be like. In that you could have, you don't all have to be nobles. You can be a cross section of this universe. I feel part of the difficulty, I guess, in imagining a game, as you were saying, is right, like Star Wars. Like when the idea of a Star Wars RPG was originally introduced to me, I was like, what? How would that even be fun? Like, there's nothing to do. Like I've seen the movies and they do all the cool shit. Like unless you're playing Luke or something, like what are you doing? Like it's like, what, you fix his X-wing before he blows up the Death Star? Like that doesn't sound any fun. But I've played, I've played plenty of great Star Wars games where I play like a scoundrel or like a mechanic. I feel part of it is once you have a book in your hand that can kind of expand the universe for you, that's off the screen, off that point of view, then you can imagine players and games that can be fun.
Like just kind of existing within that universe rather than trying to play something that's from the book or the movie. I could see that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping, I guess, because I understand that there's only so much that you can say about the game that is coming out. So, and that makes perfect sense because the game is no doubt under some kind of license from the movie studio,
correct,
that owns the rights to the whole thing. And when those guys, I'm sure that they have an ironclad NDA on it, and they're like, they don't want anything coming out, they don't want any little squeaks, right? Because that's how movie studios are. They're very jealous of their copyright and their IP. So I completely understand.
Yeah.
So kind of just from the high level view of like, well, we're role players and we may or may not like Dune. Somebody comes up to us and says, let's play a fucking Dune role playing game, right? I think that the first thing I am gonna think as a player is like, well, shit, I hope you are the dude who like read all those fucking books at the end of the series, and then like his giant pile of notes, like Silmarillion type shit, so that you know about some planets where there's something going on other than Arrakis, desert planet, because it seems to me like everything that's going on in Arrakis Desert Planet has been pretty well spoken for. So, like, is that an interesting idea for us as players? Is the world of Dune so compelling that we're like, oh yeah, I'm playing in the world of the like Imperium or whatever, but I'm not on Arrakis. I don't give a fuck about spice worms and shit like that. Like, is that still interesting, or could we just be playing anything else?
First, let me talk about just a quick thing about the NDA, which is one of the reasons we're having, I feel, this almost golden age of RPGs is there's just such a hunger for content across all media now, and RPGs, like those things that we loved as kids or adults, are now part of that process. They're now being mined for that material. I mean, Dune's not really, that's not a good example for Dune, but WoD and stuff like that. You're seeing these other companies, video game companies, movie companies coming into this space, this RPG space. It's kind of changing the way we operate. Like I, as a creator, traditionally, I'm used to being able to talk about the games I'm writing for and what's coming up and all that stuff in a very open, transparent manner. So it's kind of been strange for me to learn this new culture, this kind of video game producer movie culture, which is, as you said, very secretive. Like they don't want you to talk about anything. So it can be difficult because that's just not the way I grew up in RPGs. And so it is what it is. We're getting this new Dune game because of the movies. I mean, that's pretty clear. So I'm happy to play by their rules. And in Vampire and other WoD properties case, it's a video game company that owns those licenses now, and they have very similar concerns. Like when it comes to video games, they have some of the most strict policies on loose lips. But yeah, to answer your main point. Oh yes, the books will definitely talk about other planets, and I feel the books also convey the idea that not everyone is focused on Arrakis or worms or the spice. Like you just look at our own worlds, in a sense, in that when Herbert wrote the books, he was trying to parallel oil and the environment and water, using spice and Arrakis as kind of a stand-in for that. And even in our own world, not everyone is constantly thinking about Saudi Arabia or oil or how our cars run. Like if people actually like sit down and think, it's very clear why we fight all these wars over there all the time and are constantly bombing the Middle East and trying to keep those people under our thumb, is because our whole goddamn global economy runs on the shit. Like we can't, food can't get to the supermarket unless the truck has gasoline in it, and the gasoline is under the feet of people who, we want to do, we want them to do what we say. So the entire global imperial structure of the economy is based upon controlling that section of the earth. But 99% of Americans don't think about oil, the Middle East, bombing Arabs at all, ever. We've got our own shit to worry about. And that, I feel, is, going to be reflected in the game. Like you never have to deal with Arrakis or the spice or think about those big picture items if you don't want to. You've got your own fucking problems to deal with, and chances are you're not rich or powerful enough to have a slice of the chom. So spice,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, spice is out of your league. Like you better be, I don't know, smuggling androids or some shit.
Are there androids and shit? Do we have that?
Well, I mean, you can if you want, because you're talking about like Ixion and forbidden AI. So if you're dealing in that, then you've got whole other problems.
Well, that's actually fucking cool.
Well,
You kind of got me. Now I'm thinking, if there's opportunities to like interact with the greater like universe and the greater
Galaxu and the Ix and all that, of course, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that's that's good to hear. Like, I mean, because I don't, I'm looking at the product and I'm thinking, well, what is it that they really want to get into here? Is this going to be basically some kind of like Shadowrun thing where it's like, you're playing Atreides guys, and then you got to go to Gidi Prime and like blow up a oil drum or something to, I mean, is it, or do I get to do real shit? What's what agency do I have as a player to tell my own stories? Or am I kind of, because some of these property games can be very on rails, right? Like,
Yes.
I don't know if I've like lectured the cult about this enough, but the Wheel of Time role-playing game that came out was unbelievably heavy-handed. It was like a game that basically said like, well, here's all these signature characters, and here's their stats, and just please don't get in their way, because if you've read the books, you know what they're gonna do, and they're still gonna do it. You're not gonna do it. You need to just kind of, the big privilege you get by playing Wheel of Time, the role-playing game, is to be around them while they are doing it. And I thought that was one of the most unrewarding role-playing role-playing experiences I'd ever had. It was really bothersome.
Interesting.
Go
Go ahead. Sorry.
ahead.
I was just.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Go for it.
you're the host. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the reason that we still have Star Wars today is because of West End Star Wars and expanding the universe and getting to the point where you can do anybody can do a Star Wars novel. I think Dune has, and Star Wars is heavily, Dune is one of those things. It's everything almost is taken from it. Star Wars, Tatooine is, the shithole version of Dune. It has no water and no resources. It just, and I think what will make this is having, because that's the one book Dune is very tightly focused on the Atreides. I think having the different houses represented and having the other fights. Also, my question is whether you have it before or after the Jihad. That would be like a huge difference before or after the Jihad, because the before times you've got all these old structures and you're working with these different houses and stuff like that. You're trying to figure out, just eke out. And then after Jihad, you have this like billions and billions of people have died, and there's just this flaming war across the universe. So, where it's set will be very much an interesting background. So I think there is meat there. It's just because some of us haven't read the 20 novels or 30 novels. I don't know how many Frank Herbert's son did.
There's like I think eight were Frank Herbert, and they kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and then Brian and Kevin J. Anderson like churned out like just, oh my god, just massive reams of, again, kind of like what we were saying in the pre-show, like grocery store level novels that were like, they definitely did not have the sort of tooth to them that the Herbert work did. So, and I certainly don't want to fucking read all that shit, like really hope that we're gonna get something that will give us a perspective on like where this game can take place that isn't like Arrakis or Gidi Prime,
It looks like there are 11 books. I just Googled it, just so you know.
Wowie. Yeah, that's a lot of books. Yeah. I mean, I haven't read all those books. I mean, I have read the main ones. My favorite is God Emperor by a long shot. Though Chapter House definitely has some very interesting stuff in there, and in my opinion is probably really the kind of in some sense it's almost the conclusion of the series in a real sense. Like you could have ended it there, very easily, and they would have been just fine without any further plugging in. I mean, I don't know how much I can really say other than you're going to have a lot of options for where you're going to set. There was definitely some concern about, I guess, giving away too much of the movie in a sense in the RPG. So I can say that you will have all the information you will need to play the game in an era that's best suited for you. even if that's earlier than is presented in the movies, or later. So you're gonna have some options there. Yeah.
To me, that's like some tremendous lulls that there's this notion that there would be spoilers like in the book
I
over
know.
like a book that's been out for like 50 years or something, and that they like had an incredibly successful film in the 1980s. It had Sir Patrick Stewart in it, no less.
With a pug. Holding a pug.
Yeah, that's the best
And
part.
pugs.
He held a pug into battle. It's awesome.
Yes. I mean, I don't know how successful that Lynch film was commercially, but it was definitely a landmark film.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
There's no
So
way.
You're right. The idea of spoilers is a little crazy, but
Yeah.
we're operating in a crazy world now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
yeah,
not
no
the
doubt.
idea. Because I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess that's all I can really say there. But there will be opportunity, and we tried our best when writing the book to present a kind of ever present now, I guess. So that we didn't want to prejudge where you wanted to set your game, but there is an assumed default. Yes, that is true. And getting in the way of the main characters or like statting out all the main characters or anything like that was definitely not anyone's concern. Like
Well, that sounds good. I do like that.
like there as far as I remember, it was I didn't see anything where it's like help Paul Atreides like get a cup of water from the well so he's not thirsty when he defeats the army.
Oh no!
Like that
that'd be
does not
my
exist.
god! Oh, like your whole adventure is just some big like Paul takes down his
The
hood and he
distraction.
looks at you and says, "Thanks for your help, bro." Now I'm gonna go have a real
I have
adventure.
played that
you
Star Wars
noob.
adventure, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh,
It's like, yeah, you send out the
terrible.
distress signal, so Luke shows up.
Oh god. All right. Well, okay, so I have one question from our cultists, and then I have my own question. I have at least one. And then maybe Richard and Ashley have some questions as well. Well, I think we're gonna try and keep this away from sort of like technical details about the game. And more maybe we'll kind of talk about like some of the philosophical, that kind of softcore philosophy stuff. However, I will say that our question from our cultist is definitely a technical question, and so feel free to navigate this how you want. Okay.
Okay, I'll do my best.
So the homie Meepor from the Discord asks, for Dune, what's going to be differentiating players in terms of classes and roles? Any radical changes compared to other Modiphius game systems? So that is the question. I will leave it to you to decide where you can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know that many other Modiphius game systems other than Vampire. I don't know if I actually own anything other than Coriolis, which I think is actually technically a Free League game, not really a Modiphius game.
Yeah, that's right. I think he's talking
Yes.
about specifically the 2D20 games, like the like probably Star Trek Adventures and Conan, because am I right that the Dune game is based on the 2D20
Yeah,
engine? Is
that's
that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it definitely follows the molds of that. I think the main difference is probably the party objectives and dealing with I guess what your power base is, whether it's a minor house or whatnot, and what you're going to be building up to and for that power base. I don't want to give away too much, but basically the idea would be that you'd be working for a house, whether minor or major, and doing things to, in the case of a minor house, basically build your rep, so that you could be a major player. So I don't think it, from my knowledge of 2D20, I don't think it divorces too strongly from the basic gameplay, and you will be able to play as the kind of signature character types that are in the Dune books. I think people who want to play
Mentat? Mentats?
Yeah, Bene Gesserit or a Mentat. They will have those.
Amazing.
They'll have those options. I guess is the best way to put it.
Cool.
Sweet.
If you don't mind this follow-up, so will gameplay that makes it so, like, say we're all Bene Gesserit, right? The whole cast is Bene Gesserit, or the whole cast is Sardaukar Terror Troopers, right? Will there be nuance and distinction in character creation that will allow us to do in like very themed games, or will it be almost a role situation where it's like, well, we're gonna want a Bene Gesserit because they can do this, and then we're gonna want a noble because they can do this, and then we're gonna want a fighter guy,
Oh.
Gurney Halleck guy, because they can do
No,
this.
yeah. Yeah, that's not a concern. Like, you won't be like,
Okay.
well, they're playing the Bene Gesserit, so I won't, or a group of Bene Gesserits are all going to be the same, or we need at least one cleric. I mean Bene Gesserit in the group. Like it's not built like that. It's definitely it's very much a I don't know if buffet is the best way to put it, but there's definitely a pick and choose quality that lets you build the character you want to build. And I think thematically that's going to be up to the storyteller when it comes right down to it. As far as like an all Bene Gesserit game, I definitely could see an all Bene Gesserit crew like rolling around, an all Sardaukar Terror Trooper game. that might take some tweaking, and might be better for like a one shot. But I would be very interested to see that as a campaign. I mean, now that you mention it, I could start piecing it together. Yeah. I mean, but it's not an idea that would actually come to me. But yeah,
I think all Bene Gesserit would be cool just because of the fact that they all kind of hate each other. So you would have like the conflict and everything even within all of them being that.
Right.
I second that.
If you're working for a power base trying to accomplish objectives, then even if you are doing individual missions over a long period of time, like if you structure the adventure that way, I feel that could work very well, actually. Especially given that Bene Gesserit. Oh, right. Well, of course. I mean, because their power center would still be, the Bene Gesserit or some subsection or faction of the Bene Gesserit. And then the time scale of the adventure could be. I mean, now we're basically just planning on an adventure. But yeah, that would be cool.
It's kind of what we do.
Now, hey, I got a couple of questions. I'm gonna kind of move into a little bit what you might call more like hardball territory. Okay, so this is gonna be kind of like these are not like the cushiest questions. So my first question is, and this is specifically to you, Khaldoun. Okay.
Okay.
The next one will be kind of to the group. All right. But what I will say is that in those of us who are part of the sort of like RPG underground, right, and we know people and we hear things, right, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be straight. Early word on Dune has not been good. There have been people who have had interactions with the game and they've been like, and they're all like, I can't say anything, but all I can say is when the game comes out, you're not going to like it. I don't know what that means. I haven't seen the game, but it's concerning. What can you say to put my mind at ease? Because I see the cover and I want to fucking buy it, of course. I want to be excited for it. What can you tell me that makes me think to myself, this is something that I'm looking forward to on the release schedule, and not something that my eyebrow is like I'm arching my eyebrow at you, Dune game. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess I can only take comfort in what happened with Soulbound, I guess. So maybe it'll take over your Discord server. Well, I mean, for my part, as I said, my writing on the book was in the game mastering section. So the 2D20 character creation, all that was, I can't take any credit for it. So I read it and it looked playable and interesting to me. As I said, my experience with the 2D20 games is pretty limited. But I think if people like the 2D20 game and concept, that this is going to fit naturally within that, and that the only real, well, I shouldn't say only real, that the major addition to this game is, giving you the tools to play in the political dimension, which is very important in any kind of Dune game. Like, I don't want to say if unlike Star Wars, but it definitely wasn't a focus of Star Wars. When you played a Star Wars game, there was no way to really rate your impact on like the Rebel Alliance or anything like that. But this game will
Right.
have those tools for that. I feel the major addition. Yeah.
I think this is an interesting segue because this kind of gets into my next kind of like let's be real here. Let's be kind of candid. And this is a conversation for the group that I'd like to have. And it's
Yeah. I
interesting.
mean, I don't get paid anymore if it does well, and any less if it does worse as a freelancer. So I have no incentive to bullshit you. I can just say that it from what I saw and wrote for it, it looked good.
And all I
Well,
have to say about
here's the
that
thing,
is
is
that nerds hate what they love. Like, you're always going to have people, especially with a property like Dune, where there's people that are really passionate about it. They're gonna hate anything that comes out about it. So
Oh
Sure.
yes, I got death threats over mummy rules. So it's
Well,
like a game that like maybe 10 people play.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got death threats over something so important as the fact
Right.
that you wrote mummy rules that somebody didn't like. My God, what's
Yeah.
going on? Internet, I'm looking at you. I'm putting you on blast. Get your
Mhm.
house together. Anyway,
I'm still here. All right.
yeah, I mean,
It did work.
clearly nothing happened. Clearly, this is a slow burn on
Yeah, I guess he
the
wasn't a Navy
vengeance of
SEAL after all.
all right. So I think you've brought something really interesting here about the politics in Dune and the fact that it's going to be something that is role played, especially when you compare it to Star Wars, which is another game where it's like, oh, there's all this political shit going on, and to be totally honest, in Star Wars, it's very kind of nebulous, and if you start breaking it up, it doesn't actually make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's a fucking parliament that is like making a robot army that's going to go fight in one corner of the universe, but then they're also going to make a clone army that's going to go fight in the other corner of the universe. And that's going to somehow cause the dissolution of the parliament. Like, what? Like, that doesn't even sound like a real plan. So Star Wars politics are already so abstract that nobody wants to interact with them. They want to interact with something that's much more real and tangible, like, oh, a Hutt is going to break my fucking knees if I don't give him drugs. You know what I'm saying? You can understand that. That's real. Dune, I think, has the potential to be a bit more accessible because it is kind of a bit more postmodern and realistic in a certain way. But one of the things that comes with it is a lot of like bullshit, right? Like, it's a game that is sort of on some level, and this is something we were talking about in our SMS group, is that it's like steeped in a lot of like bullshit shit. There's a lot of like white dude power fantasy in Dune.
Okay.
There's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of like Empire is a valid and like legitimate form of like leadership and rule. There's a lot of kind of like imperialism for capitalism is like going to be is like baked into the setting and is like obviously kind of like I can only imagine will be part of gameplay. Like how much like if we're playing this game, like can we play it in a way that is not just kind of some kind of like I don't know, like right-wing exploration of colonialism? Like does Dune have to be a game of colonial oppression? Or is that just what the game is about?
Well, that's a great question, and that definitely hits upon a section that I helped write for the core book. Yeah, because for
Lay it
me
on
that
me.
is, yeah. I mean, okay, so Dune, as I see it as a book, is a critique of all that. I mean, it presents it to you in a very bold, plain way that they're these global houses, but what are they really? They all are participants in this shareholding company that exploits resources from this colonized planet, where the people there get zero benefit from the resources being extracted and are in fact brutalized and oppressed. so that these resources can be extracted in the most efficient possible manner to, further oppress and, the galaxy and, these imperial concerns. And that
In fact, that colony is actually used as a game piece, and this is one of the very first things we see in the novel and we hear in the movie is that colony is a white elephant that can be moved around as a weapon if necessary to exalt some or to destroy others. And I don't think anybody wants their fucking home to be treated that way. So anyway, go ahead. Please continue.
Oh yeah, I mean, right. So in the original books, I feel that it is the idea is for it to be a critique, and in the original books, even the protagonist is basically a critique on the whole idea of a protagonist. Like, not to spoil anything, but Paul Muad'Dib, Paul Atreides, is not the good guy. I mean, on some levels, he's almost the Hamlet figure. Because on some levels, and I feel that this is some of the stuff that Star Wars really poached heavily from Dune with Luke Skywalker, which is, Luke Skywalker, wins by deciding not to fight. And Paul Muad'Dib basically loses when he decides, well, my revenge and my, personal ego is worth, a galactic genocide. Like he sees the future and decides that, okay, it'll be worth it. He knows the final outcome of, his heroing is going to be, the death of billions and billions, if not trillions and trillions of people all over the galaxy. And that he doesn't have the, strength to, do what needs to be done to, really solve the problems. That falls to, to his son, who has a novel way of solving things. So I feel that Dune the books is a critique on the basic premises of, heroes and how to solve problems in the world and even capitalism. But I feel that you are correct that when you play in a universe, even if the original intent was as a critique, there's a very real chance of falling into the two-dimensional space of the narrative as presented to you. Like say in 40K, where it could be very easy to fall into the mindset that, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is a well-functioning system. Praise the undead fucking emperor. Like, you can fall into that trap of, well, of course it makes sense that we kill all the mutants and aliens and that we build super soldiers, which are as alien to humans as any goddamn Eldar, go and do that. Like, these giant fucking men with exoskeleton skin you would never allow to like just live on a human planet. Like we just send them out into space to like exterminate anything different than humans when they're far more different than humans than any other alien we've encountered.
And we see this at the end of the Lynch film, right? And it's like Paul's holding his Chris knife up to the air, and it's raining on him, and we got these power chords in the background. It's like, and you're like, and all the Fremen are like, fuck yeah, we're gonna fuck over this fucking empire so hard now, and there's this feeling like, yeah, man, that empire fucking sucked. The Emperor needs to get it. The Harkonnens need to get it. Now they're gonna get it. And it's like, yeah, but Paul is just being the new Emperor. He's just
right.
He's obliterated the system by recreating the system with himself. You know what I'm saying? And then of course in the subsequent books, we see what fuckery that becomes, and we see his own kind of feelings about like how that has played out. But like when we're gaming at the table, like how are we going to interact with that? Like are we going to be like,
that is partly
go ahead.
That's a twofold process. Like that's a meta process. Like you have to have that conversation with your players because there's going to be stuff in the game master section that discusses that. It discusses, the position of the Fremen, and that their position is basically a colonial position. It discusses, what the importance of the spice is galactically and what an imperial empire like must do to keep itself running. Like it discusses those things, and it also discusses. and nothing's final. I mean, obviously, I've written things and they've been submitted, and what ends up on the cutting room floor, you never know. But definitely, there's a discussion about the trap of prescience. That which is a very important part of the Dune mythology, which is when you see what's
I
going.
dig that. That's cool as fuck.
Yeah, when you see what's going to happen suddenly, like when you just like Schrodinger, once you open the box, you decide reality. Whether the cat is dead or alive becomes real once you look in the box, and that's Paul's forever trap. That's a trap of anything with prescience, and prescience is a major part of the game, whether you're Paul or not. Like the Bene Gesserit deal in that all the time, which is
Ooh,
once you
that's intriguing as
well,
fuck.
yeah, once you
Mhm.
look into the future, that is the future you're going to have. So you have to decide, how important it is to you to see the outcome before it happens, because you may lock yourself into an outcome that you do not wish. And that's part of Paul's problem, and eventually his son's problem, Leto the Second. And that is a very interesting subject to role play around. But that's more of a metaphysical issue, yes.
Mhm.
Less of a political capitalism issue, I guess.
But
But right, you have to
we can
walk
imagine
outside
a
the frame.
game, and we can see like I'm just gonna be bummed if I buy the game and then all of a sudden it's like you get like bonus points for making more money, right? And you get bonus points for like killing your enemies, but there's no blowback for other things. There's no consequence. Like there's no sense of what the context is. Does that make sense?
No,
Or am I just blathering?
no, that makes complete sense to me. I mean, you can't dictate or control what happens to the table. Obviously, I hope that
Yeah.
we've provided enough tools and context that you can play the game you want to play, and that you can play the game that you feel Dune deserves. That's really what it boils down to. I mean, when I play a game of D&D, I'm not upset if I can't, talk about Marxism or something, right? I mean, there's certain things that I expect from a D&D game that I might not expect, or that I don't expect from a D&D game that I do expect from, say, a Star Wars game. Like if I play a Star Wars game and there's no context for the morality of dark and light side, then that's not Star Wars game for me. That's not going to be. I'm not going to be able to express what I want out of that game in a sense that I feel is real for Star Wars. And with Dune, I feel if you can't talk about exploitation, and you can't talk about the damage of exploitation on people and the environment, then you're not really talking about Dune. And I feel that there are systems and advice in place to allow you to play those games.
Awesome. Richard, what are your
Oh.
thoughts, man? I feel like I'm just
Well,
dominating.
no, I
here.
mean it's a fascinating conversation. So, but this is when I first interfaced with Dune, and I interfaced with Dune much later than it wasn't one of my science fiction things that I read when I was in high school or whatever. When I first read it, I didn't. I mean, I was like, I kept reading and it was like, man, Paul's kind of a shithead, and
Mhm.
and I'm like, why do people like this? I mean, like, and reading it again, I was like, okay, I understand the critique, but I'm glad that there is a section in the GM's to talk about this, because I think that's otherwise I think the trap is so sweet and so easy, and that's one of the reasons that I think a lot of D&D and a lot of other games fall right into the imperialist kind of trap, is like we don't talk about this before the game actually happens. Is like, look, there are these forces in this world and they're not good. Let's talk about that first before we start playing this game, because we know we have to decide whether what kind of what we're going to do around this table. Where it's
Right.
what
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, I saw the movie when I was a kid, around when it first came out. In fact, um, And then I read the books much later in life. I actually read what did I read? I actually had read Dune as a teenager. I think it didn't make a major impact on me. There was another book actually called The Prize by Daniel Jurgen, which is actually about the history of oil, that I read several times in high school. That for me, once I read that, then Dune made so much more sense to me. Like once I read The Prize, then suddenly I was able to be like, oh, and I was suddenly able to reflect on Dune in a completely different way. When originally it only hit me as a sci-fi book originally. And then I read, God Emperor of Dune much later, and that really I felt was a revelation. It was such a wonderful book. So for me, I agree that you have to talk about it at the table, but more importantly, the idea of what Paul represents, whether as a protagonist or antagonist or something in between, is its own conversation that you don't necessarily have to have at the table. But I feel once the game master has an idea or a sense of it, he understands what the player's actions can mean in a Dune setting. Because really, I feel there are two critiques of Paul. One critique is that he's a white savior. It's one critique I hear, which isn't one I particularly agree with, because Paul isn't really a savior. I mean, he is kind of like a charismatic manipulator. He uses other people's culture against them in a sense to manipulate them to get what he wants and what he needs. So he's not really saving anyone except himself.
But didn't the Bene Gesserit set him up? Like they set up whoever they were going to choose as the Kwisatz Haderach, and set and they literally dropped the Bene Gesserit on all these planets to like seed their myths onto them as okay. And then if a Bene Gesserit needed help, they would literally go, "That guy's the savior." And he's gonna save us.
Yeah.
So that's how that was like.
Yeah.
That I think that's where the white savior thing comes in. Is it's like, but also he is this powerful person coming to this place to save it, right? Because that's what they're pretending to do. They're saving their own ass, really.
Right. Yeah. The mission Practiva stuff. Right, where the Bene Gesserit seed like these myths. And yeah, originally the Fremen were like Zen Sunni pilgrims who settle on Arrakis. So they kind of seed their own myths into the Zen Sunni beliefs, and any Bene Gesserit in trouble could make use of those myth seeds for themselves. And Paul takes that obviously a step beyond with his own charisma and prophetic powers to wield the Fremen as a weapon. So I mean, the thing is that he doesn't actually save the Fremen. Like I feel that to be a white savior, you actually have to save the Fremen. In a sense, he destroys them, and he knows he's going to destroy them. He says so. Like by the time of God Emperor of the Doom, the Fremen don't even know how to wear the suit anymore. They couldn't survive in the open desert anymore. They've been so corrupted, and obviously Arrakis has been so deeply changed. So in a sense, he destroys Fremen culture, and he knows he's going to, and he just needs them for his purposes. And the Jihad is kind of a strange thing because he presents it as a side effect or a problem that arises from his actions, when in actuality, it seems to me that it must be a necessity. Like without the Jihad, he wouldn't be the emperor. Like as pat as it is as, oh, I deposed the old emperor and married his daughter, so now I'm emperor. Like I bet half the galaxy is going to be like, fuck that. I guess we don't have an emperor anymore. So you send the fucking Fremen out and you teach them a lesson.
Right, but Herbert literally cuts that entire reason kind of that reason you have to figure that out yourself, because in between Dune and Dune Messiah, it's the Jihad happened, it's still kind of happening, but it's mostly over. All right, we're gonna go on with the game of houses, and we've got this conspiracy happening, which I think the conspiracy is totally good fodder for a role-playing game, having people from different factions embedded in different places to try and do a thing. What was the other critique that you hadn't, that I interrupted you before you got to? We got the white savior, and then
I wouldn't say critique, but that he's a villain. Like one critique is right, that he's a white savior, and the other one, which I guess I more fall in line with, is that he's not actually, the hero at all. In many senses, he is the villain of the story. And he kind of fulfills that hero's journey much faster than Luke does in Star Wars. In that, he kind of starts the book. He starts as the victim. He moves on to the protagonist for a very short slice of the book. Basically, by the time he's meeting the Fremen, his protagonist arc basically ends once he all but displaces Stilgar as the leader. Then he's basically an antagonist throughout the rest of the book, because he's really the power in the book until he finally is victorious over his enemies, and then the jihad happens. Like, I mean, if you think about what a villain wants to do in any plot line, if I told you, okay, these are the goals, the ultimate outcomes of these people's actions. If I said, oh yeah, and this guy murders half the universe, well, you'd be like, well, that's the bad guy, right? Well, no, that's
Right,
Paul
right.
Atreides. That's the hero of the book. He's the one who does the stat.
Yeah.
So for me,
I think.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like the sort of will to power kind of
Right.
message that comes from the book, and then this kind of like implicit like oh well, if you want to be the Messiah, you better be the noble first, like, and
Yeah.
like there's this kind of it's this Excalibur kind of thing, um that stuff doesn't sit well with me. And I think that we're just in an era where people are. I mean, I don't know. One of the stated objectives of this show at this point is that we're trying to get people to think about this stuff more while they are role playing. We're engaged actively in the process of deconstruction, and there's like a lot of like rightists and stuff who think that deconstruction is like inherently harmful, and that I don't understand that idea that you don't want to like read a text and examine it and break it down and see what the subtextual ideas are
Yeah.
and understand what the subtext, like, to me, that's to me, to say that is a destructive act is to claim like willful ignorance. But we are definitely engaged in the act of like role-playing deconstruction, which is, well, what are we really doing, like, are
Right.
we playing like a role-playing game that's about, what's it about, and like what is our relationship to the subject matter, like, while we are playing it, like, are we
Right.
the chosen ones because we were born into some fucking house and we get to wear medals and shit, or like, are we oppressors because we want to steal spice and fucking sell it for
Right.
money? I mean, what does all of this mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge. I love Edward Said, and I've read many books by Edward Said, and I would consider myself, a student of Edward Said and his books, Orientalism and what is it? What is it? Ends of Empire or some such, where he basically deconstructs books like by Jane Austen, like Pride and Prejudice, and not to mention Heart of Darkness by Conrad, which is the basis of Apocalypse Now. He really talks about that, and I think it is important to deconstruct text and stories, and he deconstructs fiction. Saeed, that's really his claim to fame, and why he's such a huge impact and kind of invented the whole idea of deconstructive literature. In that stories shape our lives and how we see the world now and in the future. And when we read something like Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre, and we see these rich Victorian people, but we don't discuss the fact that those castles and rich clothes are all provided by the work of slaves, we miss something. And it's important to deconstruct the text and to understand that. Like in Jane Eyre, he has a wife that's like locked in an attic, who's even though the text doesn't really point it out, is assumed to be half black because she's from the West Indies, and he married her for her money, and all that money came from the slave and sugar trade. So like we can read those books, and the word slavery never appears once in any of those texts, but that is the underlying economy that created, this rich Victorian era. Like when you watch something like Bridgerton, the cast is a multi-hued cast, but they're in the Victorian era. So I mean, it's that is part of the juxtaposition of what they're talking about. There is that the money and the riches, the empire is built on the backs of black people and brown people. And from reading the text without deconstruction, you would never know that. And Dune can have a similar message, if not for the subtext implanted by the author. It was his intent. You would get this.
Right.
It was definitely Herbert's intent. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't subtext. I feel it was text. But yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I agree 100%. And I think that on some level, we discussed Warhammer, and Warhammer being a direct kind of descendant of Dune. And I think that we've got a real problem in the Warhammer community. It's very obvious from the sort of media personalities that have occurred online that Warhammer has a problem with people who are unable to deconstruct it and to see the social satire and to see the critique, and they take
one of the problems
like,
of satire in general. Yeah.
Right, and they take it at face value as being like, oh, well, this is just a game about like cool fascists, man. Like, and I hope that when we roleplay Dune, and that when people roleplay Dune, and they get this book in their hands, is that they're able to see kind of like, and that they're able to roleplay this as again a critique of our current world, a critique of like late stage capitalism, a critique of empire, and environmental collapse.
Yeah.
And that they don't just see it as like, oh no, this is a great game about like I was born into a swell life, and that means I get to put people under my boot. You know what I'm saying? Because there are some. Go ahead.
I guess I have a few things to say about that, which is right. It is funny that satire is often taken at face value, and you get lots of stupid takes because of that, and a lot of kind of like Randian shitheadedness because of that. And I find that doubly hilarious since. Spartans and Romans, two peoples that are infinitely, supposed to be mimicked by, right-wing people, were supposedly some of the most sarcastic people on the planet. They invented the word sarcasm. Spartans were known to be laconic, which exactly means saying something but meaning the opposite. So it just, humors me so much that the people so immune to sarcasm are the same people who wish to be Spartans. Like they wouldn't have survived, one moment of having a conversation with a Spartan because they would have taken everything at face value. And on the other end, as far as having to be a noble, Jessica, the concubine of Leto Atreides, who supplies part of the genetic component that is required for the Kwisatz Haderach to arise, is basically a concubine, is a mistress, and she is basically described as coming from no particular good genetic stock, except for the Harkonnen bit that has snuck in. So that's to mix the two bloodlines. But I do agree at face value, it is very much the nobles coming together. Not to mention the fact that, though I don't think this was Herbert's intent, quite the issue. I think Herbert was kind of like that. A Kwisatz Haderach, this ultimate messiah being, could only be a male. I think it was partly Herbert's kind of imperfect understanding of genetics at the time. Like he was kind of taking this like XXXY thing in a very literal fashion. So for him, the reason that the Kwisatz Haderach had to be a male is because of the Y chromosome. So he got the X chromosome and all the genetic memory of all the X chromosomes in his line from his mom, and he got the Y chromosome, which is all the male genetic memory from his father. So the idea that there could be a woman who would have a Y chromosome was a scientific idea, which seemed beyond belief for Herbert. Even though nowadays we know that just is not the case.
That's fascinating. I mean, one of the ways that kind of I was actually recently listening to a podcast where they were talking about, it was a science fiction novel that had been written by a actual scientist, and that he was like a contemporary of Hawking. and he thought that Hawking with Big Bang was like full of shit. So he like wrote into the novel like these little digs at Hawking of like, only someone who is very behind in their studies would think this stuff. And so it's interesting how
I would never do that as an RPG writer.
I think it's interesting when scientists and science fiction kind of meet up and we get to see kind of maybe some ideas that were being explored and that didn't work and ideas that did. At this point, I feel like we've had a really valuable discussion. I feel like this has been a really zesty one. Ashley, is there anything that you'd like to add that you haven't been able to? I don't want to feel like you're being run over here.
No, I fully agree that Paul Atreides is the bad guy. When we were talking about it in our group, he has been raised so his head is so far up his ass, he's using his own saliva as hair gel. And so when he gets to the point where he becomes the Kwisatz Haderach, the whatever, yeah, that guy.
Universal super being.
That guy, yeah. He does become this unfeeling monster where he has this great purpose that he has to fulfill, and he does not give a fuck who is hurt because of it or who gets in his way. It is all, he does use the Fremen as a complete weapon to accomplish what it is that he feels like he needs to do. So yeah, I just want it to be known that I agree he's a villain. I don't like him, and with maybe a little bit of the white savior messiah complex thrown in there, because I only got through the first book. I haven't gotten to the God Emperor or anything like that yet, so I don't feel like it was quite as obvious early on that it wasn't that. But I'll read the rest and see how I feel afterwards. Either way, he's a bad guy. I don't like him. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, the Harkonnens did want him dealt with. They understood that you got to kill the kid because he'll come back looking for you. It was Yui that like screwed that up because them breaking the his conditioning like was imperfect. So
Yeah.
like I think that the part of what leads him to become the person that he is like the trauma of him being a child. And this is one of the things you kind of miss when you watch Kyle MacLachlan do it, because he's like, I don't know, how old is he in that, like 25 or something?
He's like
Right.
40. He's like 40 in that movie.
But like in the book, and I think this is one of the things that the new film gives us an opportunity to explore, is this is these horrifying things where somebody's attempting to assassinate him, somebody's attempting to eradicate his family. These things are happening to him as a child, and I think that they affect his worldview and that they make him capable of making some of the decisions that he ends up making. Now, I don't think that the new film is going to turn their ship into the wind on that too much, because if there's one thing I've noticed from the trailer, it seems like they're kind of trying to make it like a teen romance kind of thing. Like, it seems, I watched the first trailer and I was like, this looks a lot like Hunger Games to me. Are they Hunger Gamesing Dune? Like, is this going to be about like sweet smooching in the desert? Because I don't remember Dune being about that. But we'll see. We'll see how it all ends up coming out. I hope that it has the sense of gravitas that the subject matter deserves. So Khaldoun, I just really want to thank you, man, for taking the time out of your day to join us on Full Metal RPG. When we were speaking, you had said that you block out your Sundays for writing, and of course, I'm a fellow writer, and I understand that making the time to writing is very important. So the fact that you were willing to kind of like bend your schedule, be flexible with our needs for the streaming and stuff, to be here with us today, that means a great deal to me. Thank you so much. Thank you also for these amazing insights that you've given us. This was a really lively conversation, and I'm very happy that you were able to come on and have it with us. You're fully welcome. Anytime you want to be on the show, please reach out to me, because this is the kind of material that I love doing on Full Metal RPG. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, it was a blast. So much for having me, guys. I really enjoy talking about games, in a serious way, and talking about how they affect our lives and the lives of the people around us. They're important. I always appreciate talking to about them with people who also take them as seriously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Awesome. Oh, yeah. No problem. Thank you so much. And thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you to the cult. Thank you to the patrons. It's been another wonderful show, and I can't wait to do it again in 2 weeks. Have a good night.